Yes, some businesses do get more than one,
And then, so we're.
or they can anyways.
They can, okay, so one business could get, whatever kind that are offered, I guess. But were people complaining about that, you gave 3 to this guy, and you didn't give us any?
So this ordinance is a little bit unique in that it's really not necessarily about the number of licenses. It's actually broken out by the number of business locations, which is sort of a defined term in here. So you'll see, for example, that there's 3 possible business locations that can be licensed as co-located businesses, which means that those 3 locations would have the potential of having 6 licenses, medical and recreational, grow, process, retail, or provisioning.
So in the ordinance,
So
you
you
talk about stacking.
Okay,
So if you think about it, right, they're going to have a facility that's selling to recreational as well as being able to sell to medical, and there may be a different price structure, but ultimately they're being sold, I believe it was.
So a stack license is actually a little bit different. Stack licenses refers to when you have a Class C grower, which with respect to adult use marijuana, you're allowed to grow 2,000 plants. Once you start stacking Class C licenses, you have the ability to grow many more plants. So the stack license concept is really something that's more related to growers, sort of at the higher level. But when you talk about operating multiple licenses at the same location, that's the ability to operate to grow, process, retail, or provisioning center, whether medical or adult use or both, out of a single facility. And so the way that ordinance is structured is that you actually really kind of applied for a business location, and then within that business location, you could potentially have, for a co-located business, 6 licenses, 3 medical and 3 recreational. But then, for example, with a retail type location, you only have 2 licenses because that business location can only hold the dispensary type licenses.
Councilman Fitzgerald.
In reference to policing these locations, who polices these locations? Does the state police them? Do we have to police them? So therefore, we're policing them. We're no different than policing liquor stores again when we do checks to make sure they're selling their liquor right. So what's beginning to happen, what I'm seeing is we're getting a total, a mess here of the problem of the citizens are going to end up paying for the policing because we're going to be tying personnel up just to make sure it's being run properly. How often will they be checked to make sure they're running properly? Is the police department's going to be doing things as far as these locations, or is the ordinance department going to have to handle it all? So we're looking at personnel. So basically, we are getting good businesses into the city, which is okay. I don't have a problem with that. But the issue is when it comes time policing, you're going to be taking chunks of money out of the regular budget just to police these locations. And you're almost going to have to be an attorney to run these locations to make sure they're running properly all the time.
There are a significant amount of regulations associated with operating a marijuana business. I will say that I don't really have any experience, quite frankly, with policing operational facilities, as the community that we represent in this capacity doesn't have any at this time. So that might be something that we could look into, for example, in Ann Arbor or some of the other areas. But I think we've heard from the chief that chiefs in the area haven't seen necessarily an uptick in crime. I do know that the state has resources and investigators and inspectors and things like that. I don't know how active they are. To answer that question, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest concerns. A lot of cities are strained right now for personnel doing these kind of jobs, and then you're going to have to get additional personnel in order just to keep up with the businesses that you have in the city to make sure everything's running properly. So,
Councilman.
I believe, Mr. Remick, that it's policed through the state. If they come out and they regulate it, they do checks just like OSHA would. I think it's that way. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's a burden on the police departments. I don't know if the chief knows anything about it or not. As far as the building, I mean, if they build a building, our building department's going to go through just like any other building, with the caveat that they have to have smell, things like that, and then the states go from there.
There is regulations that are in place that are monitored by the state. The facilities I've been in have camera systems where the state can monitor everyone that comes in there. I don't know of any police department interaction. We don't check
when I asked him who monitored, whose job was it to make sure that they were doing the paperwork properly, he said me. He said, I go there, he goes, I talk to these people on a regular basis. The store we went in, he said, listen, this guy's a great guy. He screwed up on his paperwork. I shut him down for a month, because he didn't do something. So that was the information that I got when I went on the tour, that it basically falls on, I don't know if it would be the county. I mean, there being a county sheriff in the city, I don't know if that would be anything, but the sheriff said that it was his position, so I don't know if it would fall, but I thought it would fall under your jurisdiction to monitor the marijuana dispensaries. Now, alcohol-related, if somebody's selling to minors and stuff like that, ATF would kind of handle, any sort of huge situations with a liquor store, right?
I would think anything even at a liquor store, if it was selling to minors, that's handled by our local police department, we do that. I would imagine that would be our role as well, is on these provisioning centers, we would be doing checking that. I have no knowledge whatsoever, and the chiefs of police I spoke with said they have zero interaction other than just, neighborly function, make sure things are all right. They don't check paperwork. I don't know how the sheriff would have the knowledge of what they were looking for with the licensing regulations. My understanding is that's all through the state of Michigan. So,
Council?
As we move forward, I would hope that we have a public meeting, and I'm sure we will. But I would hope that we would invite some people that actually do this and tell us how they do it and what happens and what the state is requiring them and some of their insight. I think that would help also.
They'll show up. They will show up.
They're here tonight.
Council?
I had a question about like environmental issues. We are downriver and, I think that, the people that I have talked to that grow it in their own homes and things like that, but they still have a pretty big facility. Sorry. They put chemicals on the plants and things, and what kind of waste or irrigation, where does that go? Does it go into the ground? Could it, over time, if you have a huge facility, I was curious about that. Have you guys?
I don't know the answer to that question in terms of what happens when chemicals get washed off of plants and things like that. I'm not sure whether there's pre-treatment requirements or not. I don't know the answer to that, but it would be regulated primarily at the state level at that point, I think, either through marijuana regulations or through the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I do know that there are marijuana regulatory agency requirements as far as like how you dispose of marijuana byproducts, but I'm not sure how that plays into issues with the water supply.
Through the chair, so if you have a facility that has any kind of cross connection between any chemicals in the potable water supply, you have to have a backflow preventer, so that if there is a siphon, it would break that siphon and you don't contaminate the system. And that's checked. I mean, that's in place on everything. They just took one out and replaced one the other day, so.
Where does it go? Where does it go, like after you're done using, or like, when they water it?
I would think that the chemicals are regulated by the state, but as far as getting chemicals or contaminating a water system, that's almost impossible. What we have in place is in the plumbing